Well, let's bring in my first guest tonight here. Joining me now, you know him well, is former White House Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, thanks for coming on after this very big week in American politics. I want to start off talking about New York, Zohran Mamdani, and I want to get your reaction to that, but also in the context of other races where Democrats did quite well this week, particularly in Virginia and New Jersey. And I'm wondering how much of this is due to an anti-Trump effect, or how much of this is because Trump wasn't out there so much in some of these races, particularly in Virginia and New Jersey. Tell us your take.
You know, James, they say every time there's a plane crash or a train wreck, 14 or 15 things have to go wrong. And all of those things went wrong for the Republicans this week. Trump wasn't on the ticket. His base wasn't motivated. The Democrats were motivated against him. They had some decent candidates. We had some bad candidates. Everything came together. And it was really quite surprising, though. At the end of the day, keep in mind that Republicans, we didn't really expect to win a lot of these races. We thought we might win the Attorney General's race in Virginia. We maybe thought we had a chance at the New Jersey governor's race. In the New Jersey governor's race, we lost by 13 points. That's not close. That's a shellacking. That's an old-fashioned butt kicking. And it's hard to spin it any other way. Clearly, the Democrats have taken control of the issue of affordability, inflation, the cost of living, and they worked that to their advantage. Now, granted, it came to fruition in different forms. You had very moderate centrist candidates running in Virginia and New Jersey, and an avowed socialist running in New York City. So I think it's sort of hard to figure out where the Democrat Party is going still. But you have to give them credit. They won the week, and they won it big.
Well, they won the week, and, you know, as I said earlier in the program, this really does foreshadow still a big split within the Democrats about which way they're going to go, the progressive Mamdani way or a more establishment way. But on Virginia in particular, how much was that government shutdown driving votes for the Democrats in Virginia, which has a large, in the north, population connected to Washington, D.C., and the government, because you had those horrific texts and phone messages from Jay Jones, and even he still won as Attorney General, having fantasized about the death of Republican opponents and even their kids.
Yeah, I would stop and please allow that to sink in, that Virginia just elected somebody who wanted to shoot his opponent's children. That's where the party is right now. But to your question about the shutdown, look, if it's going to have an impact anywhere, it would be in the state of Virginia. But still, I think even without the shutdown, the results are probably about the same. Keep in mind, these are federal workers. Whether or not they're at work or they're not at work, they just don't like Donald Trump. That is the deep state for the most part. They haven't liked him since 2016. They're not going to start to like him right now. I don't think it's possible for them to like him any less. So the shutdown probably played a very, very minor role in Virginia. I don't think it played a role at all in New York City or in the state of New Jersey. The media here will try to make it now a loss for Trump because of the shutdown, to put pressure on him to reopen the government and give in to the Democrats on Obamacare. But I certainly hope the Republicans aren't reading too much into the connection between the outcomes of the election and the shutdown.
Well, just on the shutdown, I've been very curious to watch how this shutdown has played, because normally these things go very well for the Democrats. But I was very interested to see what Frank Luntz had to say on CNN. Have a look at this.
Everyone is being hurt by this. Everyone's credibility and respect, and looking at the government, and the public just looks at this and says, why? Why can't you find some agreement? Why can't you give? Why can't you cooperate? It is hurting the Republicans, but it seems to be hurting the Democrats even more.
And this week we are going to have air traffic control dialed back by 10%, air flights dialed back by 10% at major airports. This is really going to start to bite once you start to cut flights and things like that. People are going to feel this now.
They are. You know, Frank is a good friend, has been for a long time, and he and I have had this conversation many times. He's right, but he's not exactly right. He says the public is upset, and that's true, but the public doesn't vote. Keep in mind, the turnout here was extraordinarily low. So a lot of the people that Frank is talking to say that you don't like either party, they're upset with the way Washington is being run. Those generally are not the people that show up in these off-year elections. It's the base that votes, the really hardcore right and the hardcore left. It's sort of in that sense, then, James, like a primary election. Not exactly the same, but it sort of trends that way. And I got to tell you, the Democrats think they're winning the shutdown. Republicans think they're winning the shutdown. That's why I just don't think the shutdown, to counter to what Frank would suggest, had much of anything to do with this outcome here.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right there. But just, moving forward with the shutdown, you've got other issues as well. You've got the filibuster and the people saying that maybe Donald Trump should end this filibuster rule around, the vote to get the government moving again. Explain to our friends here in Australia who may not be across the ins and outs what this word means and why it's so important for getting the government funded again.
Yeah, it's important for a lot of different things. It's essentially a rule that requires any piece of legislation, with certain exceptions, any piece of legislation in the Senate to obtain 60 votes. So unless a party has 60 votes, it means that anything coming out of the Senate needs to be bipartisan. It's not constitutional, by the way. In fact, it's not even that old. The current filibuster rule was created in the 1970s. It used to be that a senator had to talk in order to filibuster or prevent a vote. That's the old movie, if you're familiar with it, down there called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart. But that rule changed in the 1970s, and essentially senators can now just tell everybody that they would talk about it. That constitutes a filibuster, and it essentially means that every vote needs 60 votes. Trump doesn't like it. I don't like it. There's a lot of folks in the Senate who do like it. Here's the critical part, though, James. To your point, Trump can't change it. Trump cannot change it. He has no authority whatsoever to change it. This is an internal rule of the Senate. The Senate itself has to agree to change this. And we tried to put pressure on them in the first term to get the filibuster to allow us to redo Obamacare. We've tried again now to try to allow us to reopen the government. And the Senate, in many ways, cares a lot more about that filibuster than a lot of other things. So I don't think the filibuster rule is going to change. And it's certainly not going to solve the problem we have today with the shutdown.
But strategically speaking, though, I mean, there could be some time in the future when the Democrats have a small majority in the Senate. And if you got rid of that rule now, then Republicans would lose a big handbrake in the future on, whatever radical things they wanted to try.
Yeah, that's certainly the argument. And I can see that argument. My response to that, believe me, I've had this conversation when I was chief of staff with Mitch McConnell with dozens of Republican senators. They're like, look, Mick, we need this for the day the Democrats take over. I'm like, the day the Democrats take over, it strikes me that that's what the voters wanted. What you folks are really doing in the Senate is preventing the voters from having a say in how their country is run. They could elect 59 Republican senators and still not have the ability to pass legislation without having it be bipartisan. I'm not sure that's what the founders wanted. If the founders had wanted that, they would have put the filibuster rule in the Constitution, but they didn't. And again, there's other sort of breaks against an overreaching Senate, which would be to go back to that rule about just having the ability to speak a filibuster, to actually talk and stop things that way, as opposed to just putting your name on a piece of paper and going off to a fundraiser. Believe me, as a former member of the House of Representatives, I'm not a big fan of the filibuster, and I wish it would go away. But I think it's mostly academic at this point. There's no interest, I think, in the Senate right now to change the filibuster rules.
But, Mick, you may very well have changed my mind on the filibuster. It's so fascinating with U.S. politics, how these debates can echo back for 250 years. Mick Mulvaney, thank you so much for your time, as always.
Thanks, James.